Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ashley Murphy-Gei, again here at the Stuckert Career Center. I am here today with Emily Butler from the Transformative Learning, who's going to talk a lot about GRE Prep, really a lot about the general information and some things that might be really useful within their GRE Prep that they offer on campus. So I'm going to let Emily introduce herself and go ahead with the presentation.
All right, thank you guys for having me. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Emily. I'm currently a teaching assistant for supplemental instruction, which is one of the different programs we offer at Transformative Learning. This is my 4th year working with TL, so I've had a great opportunity working with our tutoring program and helping to supervise some of our tutors, and now working with our supplemental instruction. And I'm super excited to help you guys today, just learn a little bit more about the GRE exam, what that will look like, what to expect, and how to best prepare for this exam. So if you guys have any questions after watching this, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is on this first slide, and I would be happy to help connect you with any of our other services. So typically when I'm running these, I'm typically working with people in person, or we'll run virtual sessions, which I'll talk about towards the end. And so I like to start off by just getting to know you all and talk about what backgrounds you all have from undergrad, what programs you're exploring, just to get to know you guys a little bit better. Hopefully you guys already have some idea of some of those programs or areas you might be interested in. And I encourage you to continue looking into those different opportunities. There really are an abundant number of different programs for you to explore. So have fun exploring those options. All right, so obviously, we won't be able to do this as formally, but my next step that I have you guys do is really brainstorm what it is about test taking that you do well, and really coming up with some questions that you want to have answered today. So I'm going to give you just a minute for whenever you are watching to think through what strategies have been very successful for you when preparing for tests, whether that's an undergrad or other standardized tests that you've taken. What sort of strategies were most effective for you? And then if you do think of a question that we don't answer in this session, again, please feel free to email me, and I would be happy to address that further with you. So I'll give you guys about a minute to brainstorm some of those strategies that work for you. All right, well, hopefully you all were able to think of a few different ideas of ways that have been successful for you to study in the past. Typically, I hear things like making flashcards or note cards, forming study groups, making your own review worksheet, or working through practice problems or practice exams. And what you'll find is that many of those test-taking strategies that you're familiar with and that have been successful for you are going to be very transferable into how you can study for the GRE. Very frequently, students will make their own flashcards, they'll buy flashcard kits or use Quizlet or other tools like Magoosh to really review some of that vocabulary. There are a number of different practice exams, both free and additional ones you can purchase, to give you more experience working through what the exam will look like and trying to mimic some of those conditions. So I really do encourage you to use some of those test-taking skills that you're familiar with and apply those to how you're studying for the GRE. In many cases, they will still be very helpful for you. Sometimes when I click, it doesn't move forward, so we'll wait just a second. Okay, perfect. So for learning outcomes, after attending this session, my hope is that you'll be able to list and describe the 3 components of the GRE, as well as identify several study strategies that you can personally use to prepare for the test, and describe some of the expectations and requirements that you'll need to know for test day. All right, so to start off, what is the GRE? The GRE stands for the Graduate Record Exam, much like the ACT or the SAT. This is a standardized test which is used to measure and assess your verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, as well as writing skills. This test has been used extensively over time and has been really fine-tuned to help assess you in these different areas. It closely aligns with some of the skills that many graduate and master's programs have identified as things you would need to really thrive in that area and in those different programs. All right, so what to expect? All right, as far as the test sections go, you will have 3 general sections on the GRE. One of those sections is analytical writing, and this particular component is going to measure your critical thinking as well as analytical writing skills. This is challenging how well can you come up with an idea or an opinion about a situation or an idea and really articulate and express your thoughts on paper, or in this case on a computer, and really backing up some of those claims and ideas with supporting evidence or examples. For verbal reasoning, this section is going to challenge your ability to analyze and evaluate different material, to really pull out important information and context from small paragraphs or from sentences, and really analyze some of those relationships between different parts of sentences or different passages that you may have to read. This one's going to be very relationship heavy, analyzing some of those shifts in language, analyzing whose perspective am I talking about, who's the audience or the voice of the different passages that you'll read. And then lastly, the quantitative reasoning section is going to measure some of those problem-solving skills, and it's going to involve some of your basic arithmetic, algebra, geometry, data analysis. This section will not go into more of the upper level, college level math like calculus or trigonometry. So it's really focusing on more of those fundamental concepts in mathematics. All right, so breaking those sections down just a little bit more, you will have one section for analytical writing, and it has 2 different writing tasks associated with it. You'll have 30 minutes for each of these writing assignments. So you'll have 30 minutes for one, you'll have a small break, and then you'll have a 30-minute opportunity for your second writing task. For verbal reasoning, you will also have 2 sections. These will not be back-to-back. It may start with quantitative reasoning and then verbal, or verbal reasoning and then quantitative reasoning, but you'll always have the alternate section before having the second section of verbal reasoning, so you won't have them back-to-back. For each of these verbal reasoning sections, you will have about 20 questions, and it's 30 minutes per each section. And then for quantitative reasoning, you will also have 2 sections with 20 questions, but you'll be given 35 minutes per each of those sections. One important thing to keep in mind for the GRE, what makes it stand out a little bit from some of the other exams that you may have taken, is that there will also be an unscored research section. This is important to know that it will not necessarily be the first, middle, or last. It could be any of the 3. They will not tell you which one is ungraded. So you'll want to treat each section that you're confronted with as if it were real and graded. As far as which section research will be, it will either be a verbal reasoning or quantitative reasoning section. And like I mentioned, doesn't have to be at the beginning or end of the exam. It could be any of those different sections that you'll take. So all in all, you're looking at about 3 hours and 45 minutes for the total test. So looking at what are some of the different types of questions that you might see on the GRE. For the verbal reasoning, about half of that section is going to be made up of reading comprehension. So this is very similar to the reading section of the ACT, where they'll give you a brief little paragraph or small story to read, and then it will ask you several questions referring back to that text. In addition, you'll have about 30% of text completion and 20% of sentence equivalence. And so these are really going to be filling in the blank with some of the vocabulary that you'll want to expose yourself to, as well as finding multiple different words that would best complete a sentence to the same meaning. And if you attend our full GRE Prep Seminar, which I'll talk about at the end, we will actually go through and work through some practice for each of these types of questions. For the quantitative reasoning section, you're going to see a variety of questions as well, including quantitative comparisons, where they will give you two different equations or numbers, and you'll have to compare both of those in order to determine the answer. You'll have multiple choice questions where you'll have one answer choice or more than one, and they will specify in the problem how many answer choices you should look for. And then you'll also have numeric entry questions where you will have to do some sort of calculation to come up with your own number, and then that's what you will type into the box. And then for analytical writing, I mentioned you will have two different writing tasks. One of those will be to analyze an issue, and the other will be analyzing an argument. And in the instructions on the GRE, they will very clearly lay out what information they want you to complete within your writing assignment, what specific questions you should answer, what things that you should consider, and they will also give you a prompt that you'll be using to create that issue or argument. Okay, so to give you all an idea of what it's going to look like on test day, while you're taking the exam, you will have the opportunity to look at a review screen. And on this review screen, it will show every number of the different questions you have in that section. It will show whether you've answered it completely, whether you've answered it partially, they'll say that's incomplete, or whether it's completely answered. You will also have the option to mark questions throughout the exam. So say for instance, you're on question 3 of the quantitative reasoning section, and you're instantly thinking, yikes, I don't remember this. Instead of wasting 6 or 7 minutes on that one problem, you could mark that problem, move forward, and then go back to this screen to identify those different numbers that you want to go back to at the end to really work through some of those challenging questions. And so that little check mark in the boxes to the far right, those are going to show which questions you've marked. And as you can also see up at the top, in this little pink bar, it will show you how much time you have left. So in this case, there's 27 minutes left. You can hide the time if that's something that you would prefer to do, and it will also show you which question you're working on. All right, so now thinking through how is the GRE scored? So your scores are actually good for 5 years, which is really great if you've already taken the exam, or if you're looking to take the exam now and maybe apply in a year or two, these will be valid for 5 years. And points are not deducted for wrong answers. So it is always, always, always in your best interest to go ahead and make an educated guess for every single question. Even if you're unsure of which one to choose, the more that you can narrow down those options and make a good guess, the better off you'll be. You will not lose any points for wrong answers. Another thing to keep in mind about this exam is that it is section level adaptive. And what that basically means is that second quantitative or verbal reasoning section that you encounter is going to be slightly adapted based on how well you performed on that first section. So if you did really, really well on that first quantitative reasoning section, you might find that that second one is a little more challenging. And I say that so that you're not concerned. Take that as a compliment that you did really well, and just continue moving forward as best as you can. In addition, thinking through that unscored research section as well, if you face a really challenging section, don't let it bog you down. It could be the unscored section, and so you want to treat each section to the best of your ability, but don't let it freak you out if you face one section that seemed really, 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 really challenging. Just, stay on topic, go into each section with a clear mind, and give it your best. Okay, looking at how each of those different sections of the GRE are graded, your analytical writing performance will be graded on a 0 to 6 scale, and this has half-point increments. So you could get a 4, a 4.5, 5, anywhere between 0 and 6 with those half-point values. For verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning, these are both going to be graded on a 130 to 170 point scale, and these only increase in 1-point increments. Typically, when you look online at different colleges or programs' websites when they present the average GRE score, they are usually combining that verbal and quantitative section together to get a score. Maybe you've seen something like 310. That's where they're combining that verbal and quantitative score together to get that combined score. Typically, analytical writing will not be combined into that cumulative score that I was just mentioning. Typically, these will be more of a separate grade or score that you would report separately. And if you are interested in a specific program, I encourage you to start looking on their websites to learn more about what some of their expectation or cutoff kind of scores or ranges are for the GRE, so that you have an idea for yourself as you're going through practice exams, as you're taking the test or multiple tests, that you have an idea of what that range is. Okay, and then reporting scores. One of the nice things about the GRE is at the end of your test, you'll first have the option to either report your test or not, and that's asking you essentially whether or not you want to score the exam. And it's highly recommended that you do report your scores. Even if you don't feel very well about it, it's a good idea to go ahead and report it, so then you'll have an idea of how well you performed. And then from there, it will show you your score, so you're able to view your unofficial scores. And then you can decide whether or not you want to send those scores. So you will have the opportunity to see that score before you have to send those off to schools. Now, they will call this your unofficial score. And what that means, it takes about 2 weeks for them to give you your score for writing scores. I have never personally experienced my unofficial scores for verbal reasoning or quantitative reasoning changing during that 2-week period. But just be aware, your official scores, you won't be able to send those out on your own until after those official scores are ready from the GRE website. On test day, you are able to send up to 4 different schools free of charge. So if you have an idea going into the test of what range of GRE scores you're looking for, and you go ahead and report your scores, and you see that you're within that range, you are able to go ahead and send that score to 4 schools free of charge. After you leave the test day in the test center, if you want to send it to additional schools, it's going to cost you $27 more. So again, really make sure you're going into that test prepared with what range you're looking for yourself, so that way you can save some money if you want to go ahead and send those scores at the time of your test. So from this section, tying it back to some of our learning outcomes, you should now be able to list and describe those 3 different components of the GRE. And as I mentioned, if you guys do have any questions about what we've covered today, please feel free to email me and I would be happy to help you guys. All right, so the next component that we were going to jump into is test taking and study strategies. And this is intended to give you just a general overview of some of the resources that you can use in preparing for the exam. All right, so one of the best resources that you can use to prepare for the GRE is to use a practice test. They offer pre-tests as well, and this is a really great first start to get exposed to what that test will look like, what some of those questions are, and really see where you're at in terms of where you want to be with your score. This helps you to just be more familiar with the test And I would strongly encourage you to take any pre-test or practice test in the conditions most similar to what you'll be taking for the real exam. So if you can find yourself in a distraction-free sort of area where you're not having access to notes or your cell phone or anything like that, that's going to be the best test of really where you're at in terms of the content for this exam. So through the GRE website, you actually have access to several free practice tests. And since these are provided through ETS, which is the maker of the GRE exam, they are going to be the most similar practice that you can have to the actual exam. So once you go ahead and sign up to register for your exam, you'll have the opportunity to add any of these different practice test options into your cart online. And these are going to be really fantastic resources for you to use in studying. I believe that these are all offered online. For the ones that I took, they just sent me a link through my email. I was able to pull that up, and then, you know, it created somewhat of a lockdown browser condition where I could use the calculator embedded in the program. I would be able to see what those different questions will look like, what the format of the exam will look like, and the different buttons that I'll be able to access. So strongly, strongly encourage you all, check out those free resources on the ETS website and do as many practice tests as you guys can. All right. As far as other free GRE prep tools, this is the website that will take you to a really extensive list of different options for each section of the GRE, as well as general practice tests that you could use. This Power Prep Test Preview tool is what I was just talking about, where it really exposes you to that format of the exam. What's that calculator going to look like? What kind of buttons will I be able to use, and how am I going to maneuver myself through the different questions or get to that review screen that we looked at earlier on. For the Power Prep Online, again, this is your online practice test that you can use. And within those subject-specific resources, there's a math review, which is about 200 pages long. Don't let that overwhelm you. But it's a really extensive review sheet that will go over really any type of math question that you could be confronted with on the exam. It will give you some practice problems, some general review kind of content material, and it does have that broken down with a table of contents at the beginning. So if during your review you realize you really want to review some of your geometry, you can identify which section to go to, and they'll have those practice problem and content material all within that section. I have a link here as well, but honestly, you can just find this by going to this website and then clicking the quantitative resources for the quantitative section. There's also going to be some resources online for the GRE math conventions, notation, symbols, all of the terminology they'll use, as well as more detailed guidelines about how they're grading and what this section will look like. Right. And so we briefly mentioned this at the beginning about what worked really well for you and thinking through some of your study strategies for an exam. So I'll give you guys another minute or so to brainstorm how you guys normally study for an exam. And again, this could be something in class for undergrad or in high school, or even something that you've done for a previous standardized test that you've used. So I'll give you guys a minute to brainstorm that. Well, hopefully you guys were able to think of some of those strategies that have been really helpful for you in studying for an exam. Very similar to the beginning, you'll find that most of those same study strategies can be applied very smoothly to studying for the GRE. Again, forming a study group might be a really great idea if you like the idea of having that accountability group to hold you accountable for showing up every Saturday to work through a practice exam, or for showing up every Tuesday to go through some math practice. Working through some of those flashcards on more of a regular basis will be really effective and really normalizing those study patterns. Typically during this section of the full GRE Prep Seminar, we would actually make a study plan for your monthly and weekly timeline before you're taking the exam. So I encourage you to do that as well. Think through when you'll want to have your GRE test completed by. What are some of those different steps you'll need to take along the way? How long do you anticipate needing to study? Typically, they suggest about 3 to 6 months for studying for the GRE, but that really varies person to person, depending on how much time you're actually going to be able to study during that amount of time for your test. Depending on how you're performing in your pre-test versus how well you're wanting to perform on your actual GRE, making sure that you're giving yourself enough time to go through some of those practice tests, to give yourself time to try out new study strategies if that's what you need to do, and giving yourself time to really work through those practice problems to become more familiar and comfortable with each of those sections. And if you guys ever want more support in making those academic sort of study plans, academic coaching will be a fantastic resource for you all. It involves free drop-in sessions where you can meet with a professional coach to come up with some of those effective study strategies, make those study plans, and really create action steps towards getting where you're wanting to be in graduate school, with the GRE exam, really whatever you're looking for. And we'll have some information about academic coaching at the end of the session. All right, so as far as general study strategies, again, using those practice tests will be one of the most valuable resources that you can use. And being aware of your strengths and weaknesses. I'm sure you've all had classes in college or in high school that you've done really well at, that it came naturally to you. And then you've also probably had some of those classes that you really had to work at a little bit more. You had to put a little more work into to make sure that you were getting the material and that you were doing well. The GRE is going to be very similar. There are going to be some sections or types of questions you will feel more comfortable with than others. It's helpful to know those strengths and don't let your weaknesses scare you. Really use those to fine-tune your study plan and to fine-tune how much time you're putting into each of those sections. Be realistic with your goals as well. You know your schedule, you know your life and all of your commitments better than anyone else. So really be realistic in setting that timeline and setting some of those study goals for yourself so that it's something that you're able and willing to stick to so you can ultimately reach that final goal. Again, use those available resources. There are plenty of free resources on the GRE website. There are other study prep options like Magoosh or Kaplan or Princeton Review, all of which would be fantastic resources to really help you fine-tune some of your study strategies and plans. Academic coaching and the study are also going to be free resources on campus. If you're wanting practice in a specific content area, even checking out some of the different free math or writing resources around campus might be really helpful. So feel free to use those resources, look and see what all is available for what specifically you're wanting to improve on. And then again, I encourage you to make that study plan, make sure it's realistic and that you're able to stick to it. All right. The best advice I can give you is to start today. Start as early as possible to prepare for the GRE. Set yourself some clear timelines of when you want to accomplish different tasks within the process. Maybe that starts by looking at your major programs you're interested in to see what are some of the deadlines for the scores. that I'll need to complete by a certain date? What are some of those scores that I should be aiming for on the quantitative, verbal, and written sections? What kind of timeline am I looking at for the application process and for getting any sort of recommendation letters and things like that? Don't let some of those other aspects of graduate school application sneak up on you. Make sure that it's all a well-rounded plan that you're working towards. But just go ahead and jump in. And again, taking a pre-test is a great first start. And if you don't do as well as you'd hoped on that pre-test, don't worry, you haven't studied yet. So it's good to know where you're starting from, and you can work up from there. And again, work regularly. Some of you may be a procrastinator, whether you want to admit it or not, but this test is not something that you can really wait till the last minute to study. It's best to review that material early and often, and the more familiar and consistent you can be with that study plan and with reviewing the material, the more comfortable and familiar you will be on test day. So it really will help to study early and often. And then take courses that include complex reading material. Even if you don't have complex reading material or articles within your coursework, you can absolutely make time to make this a priority for you. Reading the newspaper, going online to the UK library and reading some articles that interest you, or reading books more. Really anything that's going to expose you to advanced vocabulary, that's going to allow you to critically think through what is my author saying, what are some of the key ideas I need to take away. Those are all going to be fantastic ways for you to prepare for this exam in a less informal or a more informal way that you can really build into your day-to-day life as well. All right, speaking of vocabulary, no study strategy will be quite like preparing for your vocabulary section. You're going to see some complicated words on the GRE. I will just tell you that right now. There are some words you're going to see that you're not going to be familiar with, and there are others that you may see as you're preparing for an exam, or that you may be able to figure out because you know what a similar word means or what the root of that word means. So improving your vocabulary will help you across just about every type of question you'll see on the verbal reasoning section, as well as helping you to elevate that writing section as well. If you can incorporate some of that elevated vocabulary into that section, it will help you as well. Magoosh is going to be a great resource that has some vocabulary review options. If you're interested in more of a do-it-yourself option, Quizlet is a fantastic resource for making your own flashcards. And I'm guessing you could even search on Quizlet to see some of the other flashcard sets that others have already made in preparing for the GRE. So explore that option if that's something you're interested in. And there's a link here as well to some different games you can use to study for the GRE. Again, reading academic journals, newspapers, books, really anything you can find to expose you to some higher level written material. When you find words that you don't know, look them up, write them down, make a little note on your phone or on your laptop. Keep a list of those different words, look them up, try to come up with some strategy for remembering that idea, whether that's a picture or an experience or an example. Try to put it in a sentence. Really anything that's going to help you remember what that word means. Another great thing to focus on with your vocab is, again, if you can look at some of those patterns between words, some of the suffixes and prefixes and root words that you might see come up in a number of different words, that will help you overall to feel more familiar with words that you may not have seen before. And you can put some of those different pieces together that you do understand to make a more educated guess about what a word might mean. All right, so after this section, you should now be able to identify those 3 different study strategies that you can use in preparing for the GRE. And if you guys have questions, again, feel free to let me know. All right, this last little component that we want to talk about is really revolved around test day. And what will that look like? What am I going to need for test day? What should I expect? So on test day, if you are taking this in the typical in-person online option that most people generally take, you'll want to make sure that you're arriving at that test center about 30 minutes early. There may be several other people there, and the check-in process can take a little bit of time. So make sure that you're giving yourself some time to get there, find where you're supposed to be, go ahead and check in for that exam and put your personal items away. Speaking of personal items, you should not wear, jewelry, watches, cell phones, anything you wouldn't feel comfortable leaving in a locker, because before you go into that test room, you're going to have to take all of that off and leave those personal items in a separate little locker or personal space that they will allow you to use. You will not be able to access your phone at any point during the test, including your breaks. I believe you are allowed to have food and beverages that you can access during breaks, but again, you won't be able to access your phone during that time. Be aware as well of what you're wearing to the exam. Sometimes those test rooms can be a little warm or can be a little chilly, so it's sometimes best to wear layers. And be aware of what you're wearing as well, making sure that, again, you don't have any of those different accessories like a tie or jewelry or watches, anything like that. They will make you remove before you go into the test. Okay, so what to bring with you. The computer delivered sort of in-person option, you'll want to make sure you have a valid and acceptable ID. You'll have an authorization voucher if applicable. I'm guessing that this would be a situation where they would email you and you would know from that email. Always have those on hand. If you have your phone, bring it with you. If it's a physical copy or if you have some sort of email, make sure that you have that with you on test day. And then keep that confirmation email you'll get when you register. That's going to include some of that information, helping you to figure out where you're supposed to be on that day. And we'll just confirm for them that you have signed up and registered for an exam. There's also a paper delivered option. And so when coming for that exam, again, make sure you have that valid identification, your confirmation email. For this option, you will also want to make sure that you have some sharpened number 2 pencils with good erasers that you can use for the exam. If you are going to an in-person location for that computer delivered option, they will give you like a little whiteboard and a marker that you can use during the exam. So you won't have to worry about bringing your own scratch paper or your own pencils or anything like that. They will have all of that for you on test day. And much like with the pencils, don't worry about bringing a calculator. Again, that calculator that you are allowed to use is built into the GRE test. So try using a very standard, basic calculator when you are doing those practice tests, or using those practice test options that are online so you can get more familiar with using that calculator. To break down more specifics about those ID requirements, it must be original. You can't have a photo of it or scanned version. Must be your original ID, passport, whatever it may be. It must be government issued, nationally from your state or province, and it must show that you're a citizen with permanent residence. It must be valid, make sure that it's not expired, and it must have your full name as well, exactly, and that name must match the name that you use to register for the exam. Okay, perfect. So taking the GRE Online, this is a new option since the COVID-19 outbreak that they have offered more of this at-home option for you to take the GRE. So we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. And as the situation is changing, I would definitely check this website down at the bottom about taking it at home, just to make sure you have the most up-to-date information about what to expect for this exam. So for the time being, you have the option to take the GRE Online using ProctorU. Some of you may have used ProctorU before in undergrad or in high school. This is an option where someone will be essentially watching your exam electronically as you're taking the exam. They will be watching like a video recording of you taking the exam. You will have to show them your environment, and you'll have to use a computer or laptop that has those different features to allow the observer to see you during the exam, and we'll talk about those specifics as well. For appointments, these are available 7 days a week. That started on July 1st, and currently that is expected to last until September 30th. So again, if you're planning to take it around that date, I would make sure that you check this website to make sure you have the most up-to-date information. So you will register and pay using your ETS account. If you just type in ETS account on Google, it will take you to a page where you can actually register that GRE account. And then once you register through the ETS website, you'll get an email from ProctorU giving you the link and temporary code for a ProctorU account. You'll use that separate account to actually pick your date and time. And so that confirmation email we were talking about before that you'll want to make sure you have, that is going to be from ProctorU if you're doing this at-home option. Okay, so what is some of that specific equipment that you're going to need? You're going to need a computer, which if you're dealing with a PC with Windows, it needs to be a version 10, 8, or 7. And if you're dealing with a Mac, you'll want to make sure it's Mac OS 10.5 or higher. For the browser, you will need to install the ETS test browser. And again, all of that can be found on the ETS website, and it will really guide you through step-by-step what you need to do in order to register and take the exam. For your speaker and microphone, you will need to have both on your computer, or it can be external, but these cannot be part of a headset. So you won't be able to wear anything on your head during the time of the exam, no earpieces or microphone sort of situations on your face. It can either be built into the computer or something that's standalone. You also need a camera so that they're able to, of course, see your surroundings. Again, this can be internal or external, but it needs to be able to move so you can give them a 360 view of your room and your surroundings. There is a system for the ProctorU systems check that you can actually use as a practice to make sure that your surroundings and your laptop or computer are all going to match these different requirements. So I encourage you guys to use that before you actually sign in for your test. All right, as far as your environment, this is some of the specifics that they're looking for. In terms of your testing area, you're going to want to make sure that this is free of distractions. So you want to make sure that you don't have your little sister running into the room handing you something during the exam. You'll want to make sure that your dog isn't barking in the background, really eliminating as many distractions as possible. Be aware as well of any like note paper or writing anywhere that you want to make sure you clear before you take the exam, and just give yourself a quiet and distraction-free space. In terms of seating, they do specify you should be at a desk or a tabletop, and they don't want people taking the test on their bed or a couch. You need more of a standard chair. And for note-taking materials, you will not be allowed to have just generic paper and pencils for notes. You'll actually need a small whiteboard to use with an erasable marker. This is really just to make sure that people aren't bringing their own notes into the exam. They also mention a transparent sheet protector as an option that you could use as well. So if that's something you're interested in, I would look on the website to really fine-tune what they're looking for there. And as we mentioned, for your attire, make sure you don't have any of those accessories the jewelry, ties, watches, and your ears and face need to remain visible. You will also need your ID in order to check in the very beginning of the test. It will just confirm that your ID picture matches your own face. Okay, so we've talked about what the GRE is, how to study for it, and what to expect on test day. So what are some of your next steps? Your next steps, again, make sure you're researching into those programs you're interested in, look at some of their score requirements and their deadlines. Based on those deadlines, make your own realistic deadlines. Give yourself some wiggle room in case you do want to retake the exam, or in case something comes up and you need to push your exam back. Give yourself a little wiggle room so that you have that option if you need it. Again, start that study plan. If you need help, there are plenty of resources around campus that would be great resources for you to use in making a study plan, coming up with some of those study strategies. And once you make that, make sure that you're sticking to it. Try to make those goals that you feel are reasonable and something you would be willing to commit to for however many weeks or months you have to study. Again, look into those resources. There are tons of resources, many of which are free, and they will only help you the more that you're able to expand your vocabulary, get some of those practice problems in. And more than anything, don't panic. Again, test anxiety is real, so make sure that you are familiarizing yourself as much as possible before test day so that you are more comfortable for yourself. But again, don't panic. It's not the end of the world if you do have to retake the exam. And so don't panic. Give yourself that ease of mind that it's going to be okay and that you're going to figure it out. UK has some really fantastic resources for the counseling center or other resources around campus that can help you managing some of that test anxiety or anything like that you may be worried about. Okay, and then as I mentioned, Transformative Learning offers a full GRE Prep Seminar. It lasts about 3.5 hours. Most of this content will be wound into that as well, but we will also focus on reviewing some of the content. We'll go through some practice problems for each of those types of questions you'll see on the different sections. And usually we have multiple people coming in to attend these, either online or in person, so it's a good opportunity to really hear some of the other strategies and ideas that other of your peers have been using to prepare for the exam. You can register for that exam using this link. I will say we do not have our fall schedule up just yet. We typically offer one GRE Prep Seminar each month, so be on the lookout for that. We should have our August date set in the next week or so. So just keep checking that and you'll be able to register for any of those fall sessions using this link. I'll give you guys a minute in case you need to write that down. All right. And then as far as some of our other free resources through Transformative Learning, we offer the study, which some of you may be familiar with, for some of your subject-specific study resources. This is going to be drop-in group tutoring. We offer specific course-based tutoring in about 30 different math, science, and business courses. We have 3 different locations, which are all on campus. Our central location will be in the Boone Center this year. The north location will be in the bottom floor of Jewel Hall, which is right across the street from the Student Center. And the study south is going to be in the Woodland Glen 3 classroom. So if you're familiar with the Woodland Glen 3 area, it's going to have the entrance closest to the like the basketball court area in that central part of the Woodland Glen complexes. The study has their own website. If you're interested in looking up our specific hours for each of those locations, as well as more specifics about when those subject-specific tutoring hours are offered. Academic coaching is also a free resource we offer. This is strictly appointment-based, but it gives you the option to meet one-on-one with an academic coach for more of that personalized session. So they're able to talk with you to identify what's worked well for you in the past, what some of those specific study strategies or study plans might look like for you, helping you find some of those strengths and really connect you with other resources as well. Most of them have already taken the GRE themselves, so they're fantastic resources if you just want some more input about what strategies have been successful for them. So you can set up that free coaching appointment using this website here. And I'll give you guys another minute to copy those or take a screenshot since this is online. All right, and that is all I have for you all. Again, it was so great to be here, and I hope that you all found something helpful from this presentation to give you guys more exposure to what that GRE test is going to look like, what to expect on test day, and get you guys thinking about some of those study strategies. If you guys do have additional questions for me, please feel free to reach out. I'll go ahead and put my email back up here for a minute, and I'm happy to help you guys if you all need any help registering for the full GRE or, again, just have general questions. Thank you guys so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Emily, so much for presenting this wonderful information for us today. I do have 2 questions that we got from our online question system, but if you're still on board, I think we have one person still available. If you want to submit your questions through the chat, I'll make sure to give Emily that question. The 2 questions that we got online, the first one is how long should I prepare to study for the exam?
That is a really great question. Typically 6 months is the standard sort of expectation of how long you should plan to give yourself. With that said, I know 3 months has been really effective for most people. And even if you have a smaller time frame than that, if you're able to really commit large amounts of your time to studying, it's possible. So you really will want to meet with someone in that case. If you're dealing with something shorter than, 2 months or so, I would try to meet with someone to really fine tune what that study plan might look like and what might be most effective for you in really planning to prepare for that exam. But 3 months to 6 months is pretty standard. Great question.
Thank you. Our next question, if you've taken the exam and you received a low score, do you advise taking the exam again for application purposes?
I am a firm believer in try again if you don't do as well as you wanted to. I have personally retaken the GRE, and what you'll find is you're typically only going to do better because you're getting more familiar, and if you really use that time in between taking those tests to get more practice, take more practice exams, expand your vocabulary, work through some of those quantitative practice problems, your score will likely go up. It really will. And most programs don't super score average all of your different exams. In fact, I don't know of any schools that do. So you'll want to check and make sure that that's the case before you start taking your exams. But you're able to choose, once you see that score, who you want to send it to or if you want to send it at all. So definitely, I encourage you to retake it if you don't do as well as you'd hoped. And if nothing else, look and see what some of the scholarship, ranges are. If you did really well the first time you took it, be thinking about that. If it's going to be an extra $200 to take the GRE one more time, but it could save you $15,000 in scholarship money, that might be something to consider as well. So I definitely am a firm believer in retaking if that's the case.
And just to add commentary to Emily's point about the financing for the GRE, both our Student Government Association and Financial Wellness can help support you in alleviating that cost. So if they do have funding available to help alleviate that for you, feel free to reach out to the Student Government Association's coordinator, Ashley Jones, or Financial Wellness to learn more about those resources to alleviate those costs. Thank you again, Emily, for participating in our discussion for this week for the Graduate Professional Series. We greatly appreciate it. This is the end of our presentation, so we're going to end the recording. And y'all have a great day. We'll post this on our website and our social media to you soon. Goodbye now.